welcome. This is going to be our first podcast episode here with Buzz Time. This is called the Industry Buzz. Basically, we're going to bring on people from around the industry just to kind of talk about different aspects of their business and kind of how they can help you build your business and your knowledge base. Joining us today first is going to be Jeremy Wells on our inaugural episode. So welcome, Jeremy. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for having me for the first episode. I'm honored. And my name is Jeremy Wells, as you said, and I'm with Longitude Branding. We are a hospitality food and beverage branding agency. And we've been around since 2010. And we work with restaurants, bars, hotels, and a lot of different food and beverage brands around the world. And basically helping them define their brand, their identity, and kind of wrap that around their purpose and their goals for their organization. And so, a big part of what we do is helping educate people, even if they're not a client of ours. We provide a lot of resources for just the general public, our audience that we're trying to reach. We have a number of different ebooks. We always are writing new articles, fresh articles and content on our website, and just sharing what we know and trying to contribute to progressing the future of hospitality as we see it and helping to shape and mold what that looks like. So it's something we're really passionate about. I'm personally relatively new to this industry, actually. Most of my career is centered around marketing and design in some way or another. A lot of it has actually been on the online side of marketing and design, focused on user experience. And so when I made the transition to hospitality and actually helping develop and define what a physical experience is like for a restaurant or a hotel, there was a lot of actually overlap in that, surprisingly. And so a lot of what I took from user experience and my knowledge with creating websites that are very user friendly and people can easily use them, translated into this guest experience when we're talking about restaurants and hotels and hospitality. So I joined as a partner at Longitude a couple years ago, and my business partner is Dustin Myers as well. So we spearhead our efforts at Longitude, and we're always just trying to refine ourselves, get better, and learn from other industry professionals too.
Have you here on the inaugural episode. I guess I should introduce myself a little bit as well and kind of buzz time. My name is Michael Wagner. I'm going to be your host for this episode and for future episodes. Basically, here at Buzz Time, we handle trivia and entertainment solutions for mostly the bar and restaurant industry, but hospitality as well. My role here is as the content and community specialist. So I handle content creation, whether that be on our YouTube channel, our blog, and now we're going to be doing a podcast, as you can see. So that's what we're kind of excited to get started with. And today we're going to be focusing on branding, something I know Jeremy knows quite a bit about. So first, let's kind of start with the basics. What is branding, Jeremy?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think if you were to ask, 5 or 10 different people what branding is, you'd probably get 5 or 10 different answers. And I think it's just because it's become such a kind of a buzzword almost in recent times, especially. People confuse it a lot of times with the words marketing or promotions, advertising, etc. And so to really define it is almost an effort we've taken on. That's kind of been a challenge, just because oftentimes you're not only defining what it is, you're defining what it's not. And so the simplest way that we've found to define branding, or the word brand, is really it's just synonymous with reputation. And so just like you or I have our own personal reputation with our friends, our family, our acquaintances, even complete strangers, we begin to build a reputation with people, right? And the building blocks of a reputation that we have personally are how we look, the words that we say, how we say them, and what we do in our actions. So as that translates to an organization or a business, it's really the same principles. So you want to look the right way, that creates the right perceptions. You want to say the right things and say it in the right way, and you want to make sure that you're delivering on those words and actions too. You want to make sure you're doing the right thing. So if any three of those are out of line, it really can harm your reputation. So the purpose of what we do at Longitude and with all our clients is making sure that we can help them align what you're doing, what you're saying, and how you're acting, or how you're looking, and make sure those are aligned, and then that develops your reputation or your brand. And so that's really the simplest way we've figured out how to define it. Again, you can ask a lot of different people, and they might define it differently. But for what we do for our clients and the processes that we take them through, really just thinking of it as a reputation is really the easiest way.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I think a lot of people get caught up on is that their brand is just their logo. It's not necessarily kind of who they are or why people should be loyal to you. I mean, what would you say about something like how would you build your reputation? Like, what's kind of the building blocks for creating a solid reputation for your business?
Yeah. So a logo and a brand identity is obviously really a big part of that. And that's actually one of the primary things that we do at Longitude is helping people develop an identity system for their organization, making sure that it's aligned with their business goals, their vision and their mission for their company, their culture. But really, again, it goes back to just making sure that you're aligned in everything that you're doing. You can look the right part. You can check all the boxes. You have a great design, hire a great designer to make an awesome logo, an interior designer, have a beautiful interior design. But if you're not able to communicate your concept, what it is, what's your unique selling proposition compared to your competition, all those words, if you're not able to speak that to your customers in a way that really resonates with them, then it's going to cause issues. And likewise, if you're saying all the right things, if you're looking the right way, but when people come to your restaurant or your bar and you're not delivering on those promises, or you're just maybe creating confusion for people, maybe you're trying to appear online as if you're this like fine dining or, some sort of like high-end bar or something, then people show up and, you're this dive bar or something. Or they just have bad service, the food quality is bad, things like that. Like you want to make sure that all three of those pieces are fully aligned. And that's really, I think, the way that you build a brand. It's not to say that a design isn't important. It's really important. But even just as important, if not more important, sometimes is what you're doing and how you're delivering on your promises and the quality. You want to go back to the basics. Everyone knows them: food quality and service, right? And so at bare minimum, you have to have that. And there's plenty of organizations that can survive on just that, and sometimes even thrive on just delivering great food, great service. And they might have the worst logo and identity in the world, but just because they have such good quality food and they're like really devoted to their guests and to their team and delivering on promises and being authentic to that brand, sometimes that's enough to carry them through. Now, on the flip side, it's not very common that you can have a really beautiful brand, the best messaging in the world, but if you're not delivering and have a great service and quality. So I guess I say that to say that if I had to choose a priority, I would definitely say that your operations, your quality of food, and your service needs to be priority number one. And then these other aspects of a brand are really just icing on the cake. It can take what you're doing already to the next level and help you grow and expand into new ways that you never could without it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of people think, I have to come up with the brand first and my brand identity and what I am first. And they kind of miss those basic steps along the way. And I know you touched on authenticity earlier. I pulled a quote from Howard Schultz, the former CEO from Starbucks. Authenticity is what makes brands last. If people believe and share values with the company, they're still loyal to that brand. Is that something that you would agree with? Or kind of how critical do you think authenticity is to a company's brand?
Yeah, I mean, I think authenticity is extremely important. Unfortunately, the word authentic or authenticity has almost become kind of a cliche buzzword in business. Something you think of like a corporate brand in a conference room saying we just need to be more
Absolutely.
authentic, and so it's lost a little bit of its meaning, I think. But when it comes down to it, people want to do business with authentic brands, even though they might not vocalize that. So I think being authentic, how that represents itself. If we look back to kind of that idea of like the reputation of a person, in that case, like if you're not authentic to yourself and who you are as a person, and you're trying to be something you're not, you're trying to create a perception of something you're not, then that's going to create issues. It's going to create issues internally for you. It's going to create issues with your relationships. It's going to create a lot of issues in your life. And likewise, if you're trying to be something you're not in the business setting, or just not staying true to who you are in a business and in a restaurant or a bar or what have you, people can see that, and it's going to create issues for you as well. That's when you start getting a lot of bad reviews. That's when staff start leaving. The culture starts to disintegrate. There's a lot of issues that come with when you're not trying to be who you really are. And I think if you can, a lot of people we find when we work with clients, they have this vision or this picture of who they are and what they want to be and what type of business they want to have, but they've never really written it down or really put it on paper. So it's all in their mind, and it's great in their mind, but when it comes to putting that into a strategy and actually putting that into work and practice in their business, that's where the challenge plays out. And that's where, you start to create confusion in your market. Customers don't really understand or care about your business. They think that, they might think you're one thing and you're not. You start to deal with employee relationships where, in your mind, you have a clear vision, but you haven't really translated that to your team. And so they're not on board there, and it just, it really, authenticity, like you just said in that quote, I think that's a really valuable thing. And I think that's, if people can really put that into practice, I think is really important. So I would say it's very important. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, and I think, like you were mentioning, I think a lot of the culture comes from branding now. I think culture and branding are kind of synonymous with the way a business operates. If you have a solid brand, you want to be living that brand inside of your culture as well. I mean, for a bar and restaurant, I know we kind of touched on this a little bit. If you're a bar and restaurant, do you think you can be successful without a good brand? I know we talked about a little bit, you want to hit those basic metrics, but can you be like truly a successful bar or restaurant without great branding?
Yeah, and I think that question would go back to, how you're defining branding. So if you define it how a lot of people define it, like, your brand is just kind of like your logo and your design and those things, then yeah, I think you can be a successful restaurant or bar without the best, awesomest logo in the world, right? But if you define it as how we define it, as your brand is your reputation, then I would say it's extremely hard to be successful as a restaurant or a bar or any business if you don't have a good reputation. You're going to basically be hindering yourself quite a bit. You can think of any business really that in your mind that has a bad reputation. It's unlikely anyone's going to refer business to you. It's people go to your website and see bad reviews. They hear horror stories of working there from other employees that have worked there in the past. There's a lot of things that are going against you if you have a bad reputation. Just like if I had a bad reputation as an individual, it'd probably be hard for me to, if I wanted to go meet with someone and they heard about me already and I had a bad reputation, it's just going to be a stumbling block for me. So our goal, and this is the goal we would hope for any business, is that you remove those hurdles so that you're kind of running full steam ahead, on all cylinders.
And touching on like that bad reputation, I guess bad branding that you maybe have, is there a way to kind of come back from that as a brand, as a bar, restaurant, or a business in general? If you do have this reputation out there or this brand out there, what would you say is like the best way for a bar or restaurant to approach that from like at least a basic standpoint?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that's a common challenge that we walk a lot of our restaurants through. A lot of them, um, they've either purchased the restaurant or bar and it's coming with the bad reputation and they're
Yeah,
trying to fix that, or they've been in business for a long time and they just their their past isn't really going to help carry them into the future. So um, that can come with a lot of good things and that can come with a lot of bad things too.
yeah, for sure.
So um, I think there's a few ways to think about it when you're trying to repair a bad reputation or a bad brand. Um, one, you want to go back to the basics. You want to make sure that you're delivering on the basics of your business and the industry that you're in. So that might mean, taking a look at your menu. It might mean taking a look at your operations manual and seeing how your culture is. It might, all these different things, the technology you're using. It might mean obviously looking at shifting your brand identity. The way that you're communicating your brand to people, to the public. But all of that needs to any changes you're making needs to hinge around a new strategy. So most of the businesses that we work with that are trying to repair a reputation have never really had a strategy, never really had a game plan, never really had any meaning behind anything they do. They're just running around, doing whatever shiny object type thing. So really, it goes back to you need to define who you are, what you want to be. You need to look at your competition out there and see, what the market's like, what the landscape is like. You need to survey your customers even. That's a really simple thing that a lot of people can do that a lot of people don't do.
Yeah.
We do that for our clients, but it's something that you could easily just do on your own. I mean, it could be as simple as asking them in person when they're after a meal, just doing a quick little survey, ask them a couple questions.
Yeah.
Could be sending it out to your email list, could be putting a little poll out there on your Facebook page, any number of different ways to just solicit feedback from your current customers about, and just ask them to be brutally honest. You don't want people to just like pat you on the back and say, yeah, you're doing a great job. That's not helpful to anybody.
And I was going to say, nowadays, with the way social media is and the different tools that we have out there, it's more poignant than ever to get that kind of feedback. I think it's so easy to acquire. And I think a lot of bars and restaurants, businesses don't really take advantage of it enough.
Exactly. Yeah. So the more feedback you can solicit and pivot from that, as long as it fits into your overall strategy.
Yeah.
Because you can't please everybody, obviously. But if you start to see trends and reviews and feedback you're getting, that might be a good sign that you need to adjust some things. And sometimes you can do a lot. You can accomplish a lot just on your own. Sometimes you need outside help, which is why companies like us exist, is to help. But really, it just is going to take work, really. And sometimes a lot of people view it as like, I'm just going to start with a clean slate. So I'm going to rename myself. I'm going to rebrand myself. I'm going to do a new menu. I'm starting completely from scratch. Other people take more of a refresh approach where they're maybe just changing some subtle things, improving some of their visuals and messaging, and then making some updates based on, surveys and feedback. And so it really just depends on how bad your reputation is, how bad we're talking. I mean, if it's really bad, you have like 1 stars and there's no going back, you might just want to start from a clean slate.
No, and totally. I think for a lot of businesses I know that we cater to, it is a lot of times a management change or something like that they're start thinking about their branding a lot. So what would you say are like the hallmarks of a good brand? And also, who do you think is really in the, I guess, food service, hospitality realm is really doing their branding the best right now? Like an example that kind of people can latch on to.
Sure. Yeah, I would say the hallmarks of a good brand are, first and foremost, your team loves working there. They're proud to work there. They get excited to come in. Everybody's kind of aligned on the same, with the same vision for where the company's going. You have a healthy culture internally. Another aspect to that is, you can take a look at a company's reviews and just look online and see, if they have bad reviews, and it's, there's probably a branding issue there. There's probably some level of issue there on a brand side. Whereas a healthy brand is probably going to have a lot more, positive reviews. So that's an easy one too. I think also just customer loyalty and advocacy is even greater. So, we talk about referrals. We talk about how often people are coming back and inviting their friends and things like that. I think if the more people that you get coming in regularly, coming back frequently, and you're able to actually track that in your in your POS or whatever system you're using, I think that's a hallmark of a great brand too. Also, I think one thing it's a little less probably trackable or measurable is just kind of like sentiment around the brand. So it's a little bit more of that touchy feely type.
Yeah.
You can't really track it. And I would say like brands that do this well, one that always comes to mind when we're talking about just kind of a good example of a great brand, I think, as far as how we define a brand reputation is, I think Chick-fil-A is a great example. Yeah. They, they're not everybody to everything to everybody per se. They're definitely they've had some heat in the past, and they've
for sure
had their own drama. But really, when it boils down to it, the people that do want to give Chick-fil-A their business love Chick-fil-A, and they'll recommend it to anybody. They'll advocate it to anybody, and I think Chick-fil-A really delivers on the promises that they're making, and you can see that shining through in the culture. You can see it shining through in the quality of their food, the environment they've created, the things that they focus on that are important, and the things that they, just the operations that they do. And so that's just one example. There's lots of other brands like, another example is and it's concept of just knowing who you are and being, and again, going back to that word of authentic. There's another brand kind of on the opposite spectrum of Chick-fil-A, if you think about it. Another brand that's more popular or has gained some traction over the past couple of years is one called Egg Slut, and they're in California. And so they have obviously probably a lot of different market, but they're staying true to and authentic to who they are. They've developed a really great reputation in their market. And so it's not to say like you have to fit one specific mold or do one specific thing, and you have to like copy that framework or anything like that. But again, it goes back to just being authentic with who you are, being comfortable with that, and being kind of that self-awareness as a company to say, we're going to be this, we're going to deliver on these promises, we're committed to this, and anybody that joins our team, anybody that is going to be a part of this, whether you're a customer or you're an employee, we want to make sure that we're communicating that mission and that vision to you and getting you on board with that.
Totally. And I think even touching on Egg Slut a little bit more, I mean, Alvin, I can't remember his last name, but he founded Egg Slut in California and has spread the brand out to, I know he's in Vegas and he has a few other locations now. He's really committed to being out there too. He has his own videos on Munchies. He's like all on social media. He's living the brand, and that brings people in, and it also just kind of confirms what they are as a business as well.
Yep.
So yeah, on the flip side of, let's say, people that are doing it well, who's kind of like, we don't need to name names, I guess, necessarily, but where does like branding go wrong, you would say?
Yeah. I think, just again, going back to the idea of reputation, I think branding can go wrong on smaller scales, and it can go wrong on much larger scales that are like PR nightmares, basically. And I think, it's something where it's kind of like, I forget this exact saying, but like basically the concept of like it's little small things over time that can really do the greatest harm. And I think without a strategy and a plan in place, you might start a business, a restaurant or a bar, and everything's going great, and you're just kind of going, shooting from the hip, and you're experiencing success, and everything's kind of coming more naturally. But over time, there's going to be small things, maybe small things in the culture that kind of create cracks in your culture, and start to become larger cracks over time and start breaking off eventually. You start losing team members. Maybe the quality of your food. We see this a lot in restaurants and bars. They start out that first few months, they're really just hitting the nail on the head, doing great food, great drinks, everything, and then kind of over time they start to lose the quality, and people start to notice that, right? How often do we see reviews where it's like, man, I used to go to this bar all the time, and the cocktails are really good, and now they're just watered down, or the food was really great, and now it's all these different things. So I think it requires us to always be improving. To have a great brand, you need to always be improving, always be self-aware, and just always have that strategy, because that's going to help in times where you might be confused, or you might feel unsure of what decision to make or how to proceed. If you have a strategy to kind of fall back on and help you make that decision, it's going to be really, really valuable for you. And so I think branding can go wrong if you don't have a game plan in place.
Yeah. And I think one of the other little things that can affect your brand is kind of the guest experience taking a hit. Would you be able to kind of touch on kind of any these experiences, interactions that happen before, during, and after the time the guest is with you, kind of can affect how that can affect your brand as well?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, one thing, whenever we talk about this topic of, a lot of people, when they're thinking about creating a brand and an experience for their company, they think of just as when someone's in their doors and they have them in the restaurant or bar, that's the experience, right?
Yeah.
But there's a lot that goes in before and after this in-person experience, right? And so I like to kind of equate it to, if we think of someone going on a blind date, and say that your friend has set you up with this person, and your friend has told you that, yeah, this person's a great person, they like XYZ, they like to do this and that, I think they'd be someone to talk to. You're like, okay, well, you'll find out their name, and so you'll go online, you might stalk them a little bit, right? And you go to their Facebook page or their Instagram, kind of see who this person is, try to get a feel for them. So that's what happens for restaurants and bars too, right? So someone will recommend a restaurant or bar, and you might drive past it on the road and see a sign. You're like, oh, that place kind of looks good, or whatever, or I wonder what it is. It's new. And so you'll go online, you'll start to snoop around, you'll start to see the reviews, you'll start to see what other people are saying, look at their menu, look at their pictures, and all of these different touch points are creating those perceptions, right? And you want to make sure that, again, those perceptions are accurate, and you want to make sure that you're delivering on those the perception you're building. But more often than not, I would say most people are creating false perceptions, in the sense that they're not doing justice to their restaurant brand. Sometimes it's the other way around, where they're maybe embellishing it a little too much. But for the most part, I would say a majority of people, just if you go to their online website or their social media, they have pretty bad pictures. Their design and their branding and the way that they're presenting themselves online is pretty bad. Maybe it's hard to find information. Going back to that user experience background of mine, I want to be able to find the menu very easily. I don't want to have to message a page and ask, do you have a menu online anywhere? I'm not seeing it. I want to be able to book a reservation easily and quickly. Things like this. These are all touch points before someone ever enters your door, that are creating perceptions around of what type of brand or what type of expectations they're going to have when they visit your restaurant, if they even choose to visit it at all. Because if we go back to that analogy of the blind date, if I'm snooping around and seeing what this person's all about, and I find out that there's things about them I don't really like, or I'm like, I don't know about this, then I might say no to that blind date, right? So, so you just want to be thinking about things like that before. And then during, obviously, when someone gets in there, you want to deliver on the promises, the expectations. You want to make sure that you're delivering a great experience, and you want to have the systems in place for that, the procedures in place for that, the culture and the team that's going to cultivate that. And that one's pretty easy for people to understand, because that's the default. But then even after the fact, a lot of people, this is probably the one that's most forgotten or neglected. how are you going to continue to build that relationship? After, if you go on that first date, what's the next step? If you like that person, if you like their food, or if you like, well, if you liked the dinner you had with that person, in a restaurant or a bar, like if you like their food, what's the next action, right? You want to make sure that you're staying in contact with them. You want to make sure that you're cultivating that relationship, so they'll come in for that second experience, that second date. And so, what sort of loyalty program in place do you have? What sort of communication do you have back and forth with them? Do you have, you have their contact information, their email, phone, text, messenger, access to message them on Facebook. There's a lot of different ways that you can stay in touch with them and just have conversations with them and build connection with them. Because I think, John Taffer, I'm sure you've heard this. It's really gone viral at this point, but like that whole concept of, I think he said, like, get people in on the fourth time, they're 70% more likely to come in again. Yeah. So if we think of that, and I think that's true. I don't know exactly where he got his stats from, but I'm sure it's probably pretty true. That we want to make sure that we're having conversations and building a relationship with these people, so they're coming in again, and there's always that next date in mind, so to speak. So.
Yeah. And I think, kind of to bookend this kind of conversation we've had, what do you think, if there was like one key piece of wisdom that you would give a bar or restaurant when they're thinking about their branding, what should be that one thing that they're keenly focused on?
I would probably say that, again, just having a game plan in place, on paper, getting a second opinion, getting your team on board with it. It doesn't have to be like what we do for our clients is we do these really pretty intense workshops with their whole team, getting all the buy-in, helping define the direction of the brand, the culture, how you're fitting into the landscape of the competition, how you're defining your brand, how you're communicating your brand, all these different things. But even if you don't do all of that, and you just say, this is who we are, this is what we value, above all else, this is what we find, this is what's most important to us, and communicating those things to your team, and then figuring out creative ways to communicate that to your customers, and then just delivering on good food, good service. Having those as a baseline for your strategy and for your game plan are vital. There's a lot of other pieces that are really, really, really valuable to that, and to fleshing out full, complete strategy, and different pieces to the brand. Again, talking about how you look, what you say, and what you do. There's different elements to each of those. But by default, I think just making sure that everybody's on the same page with where you're going, what you represent, what you value, making sure you're doing your best to deliver on those promises. Because if you don't really have the whole saying of, I'm not going to think of it now. I'm bad at sayings. I always forget. It's the concept of someone in chat can help or something. But if you don't have failing to plan is planning to fail. I guess that whole saying. And so I don't know who said that. So someone knows who said that. But I think that's really true. I think it's an evergreen statement. I think a lot of people, unfortunately, it's especially common in restaurants and bars, just go into it thinking, I love food and I love drinks and I'm passionate about this and I'm just gonna start and go for it. That works sometimes, not very often, but I think a lot of people just go into it without a plan. And so I would say planning and having a strategy in place would be hugely valuable.
I think just having a plan in general for most things, but I think key for branding as well.
Yep.
Especially when you're getting into the bar and restaurant business. I think that's kind of all the time we have for today. I want to give you, Jeremy, a chance to kind of shout out any sort of ways to follow you or keep in touch. And then if anybody does have any questions, go ahead and throw them up in chat right now, and we'll get to them at the end.
Yeah, sure. So you can find out more about Longitude and see some of our clients and case studies at longitudebranding.com. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Excuse me. I don't have an exact timeline on when this book will be launched, but we have written a book, and hopefully it'll be published later this spring, called Future Hospitality. So if you wanted to follow the progress of that, you can follow Longitude. We'll be posting updates about that, but you can also search for Future Hospitality on Instagram and on Facebook. Follow us there. And then, as always, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. We also have, groups like Michael, where I'm the Buzz Time group. I forget what's Restaurant Bar and Owners.
Bar and Restaurant Pros on Facebook.
Bar and Restaurant Pros, yeah. Groups like that are a great way to connect with other people, and I try to be as active on those as I can. So you can always maybe find me on there too. But
yeah. You're definitely an active participant on there, and we appreciate that.
Yeah.
Doesn't look like we have any questions, so I just want to thank everyone for coming for our first live podcast. You'll be able to find this on podcast services everywhere, as well as our YouTube. And again, thank you for joining us, and thank you again, Jeremy, for taking your time to discuss this with us today.
Yeah, for sure. My pleasure. Thanks, Michael.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone, for attending. And again, check us out on Buzz Time on YouTube, as well as the Industry Buzz on podcast services. Have a great day, guys.